Now that we have power back, welcome back to some more Scrap Mechanic. I am StormRunner Gaming, and today I'm jumping back in after a while of not being in Scrap Mechanic. Not a big reason why. I have jumped into a couple other games, especially Hunt. But this is something have been working on for a while and just trying to kill a lot of the bugs in it. But I'm going to be talking about the bugs later. But basically, what I've built with this mess of wiring is it's supposed to be an automatic rock crawler that doesn't autonomously drive, but the system on it is supposed to autonomously tell when a wheel doesn't have traction and give it more traction by applying pressure with a piston onto the one side of the axle. And as you can tell, I still have suspension pieces on each side of the axle, because if I didn't have them, then the axle wouldn't move at all without the pistons, or it wouldn't move at all because it's like a rigid square, so you wouldn't be able to actually technically move it. Or when I tested trying to do that thing, I wasn't able to actually get it to work. But anyways, I'll be going over what I've built with all the wiring later on. Right now, I'm going to be driving it at 3 frames a second. So, for everyone that actually wants to see the system working, but it's not a perfect science, honestly, just because there's a lot of variables that are still not called for in this. Like, Scrap Mechanic isn't exact on where, like, a rock is or the ground is in general, so the sensors sometimes see something that the wheel's not going to see, and it kind of throws the system off in general. So that and not being able to actually technically figure out what is exactly under the wheel is a big problem, because if you're trying to make sure that the wheel has traction at all times, then not knowing exactly where the wheel is a problem. And one way I've tried to fix this a lot is when the wheel comes off the ground, or the sensor believes the wheel is off the ground, it will start a timer, and if the conditions to release the piston aren't met within that timer, the timer will turn it off again, but it'll turn right back on. So if you see the car go up and then down and then back up again, you know that the timer, that the conditions weren't met, but the timer actually turned it off and on, because sometimes the conditions will never be met, and the piston would have always been pushed down. So throwing that timer in there actually does help us out a lot with continually keeping traction, because one side might be up like forever almost. Well, not forever, but the conditions wouldn't be met for a while. But anyways, you have been able to see a little bit of it moving around. I kind of want to go on the principle, like, I've made it so much more complicated, like the older version was so much better in a sense, because this one has so many moving parts and it limits itself too. But, I mean, I just wanted to see if I could actually pull this type of idea off and see how well it would actually work, because people have done autonomous systems within the game of Scrap Mechanic. And I was thinking I might as well try something, because, I don't know, it seemed like a cool idea in my mind, and I'd gone through a lot of different ideas to do autonomous stuff, and this just seemed easy enough for me to be able to comprehend what I had to do. But I did use a lot of and/or gates with it, and as you can tell, it's not winning any speed races. It is very slow, but that is a rock crawler in general. It's crawling, not speeding up anything. I mean, they do usually have a lot more power, but this one is limited in its power, just because we are using electric engines just like the other. It is basically the exact frame with a lot of sensors and timers and the logic blocks. What I was going with that, I couldn't remember what they were called, but some more advanced rock crawling, like getting into those divots where the weight isn't on that wheel, the pistons excel in that. That's one of the parts that the other one falters, because just having the suspension there doesn't help as much. I mean, it will still give you downforce on it, but not as much as I've seen you need. So, especially with the high center of gravity that some of these do have, even though does have a lower center of gravity than other rock crawlers I had built. So, But I believe I am going to go into the logic now. So anybody... Alright. So the logic isn't terribly complicated, but it can get confusing at times because there is a lot of wiring here, which actually it doesn't do much. It only powers 4 pistons on the build, but it's got, I believe, 4 sensors per wheel. So you've got the 2 on the front and back of the wheel and 1 on the axle of the wheel for front and back, and then we also have 1 on the body that is detecting here too. So the first 3 around the wheel are telling one logic gate that the wheel is on the ground, and if one of them goes off, then it will set off the and or gate to tell the timer to go and the piston to fire on our axle. So, but then we only have one condition to tell us that the wheel is back on the ground, and this sensor. Actually, I believe these 2 are. I haven't used this in a while, but we actually have these 2 sensors that are telling it that it's back on the ground, and these 2 are telling it that it's off the ground. So if any of these 2 disconnect from it, it will push the piston up, and these 2 realize it's back on the ground, and they will stop it from keeping the piston on, or it will turn the piston off after the timer is done, which the timer is there just in case these 2 never see it come back to the ground, then the timer will actually turn it off after. So that is one thing, because when I was preliminarily building this, oh, that's a difficult word, I would have a lot of times where the piston would constantly stay on and it wouldn't actually turn off, and so I'd have all 4 of it like on stilts basically, and it would fall over. So adding the timer in was actually one of the best upgrades I did to it, and more sensors. The more sensors I added in, the better the results got for it, just because in general it was able to sense more of where it was. And there actually are a couple other things that I actually designed into this, other than having the 4 sensors around the wheel. There are other things that I put logic into this. Like, it'll sense if the thing is tipping either forwards or backwards or to the side and try to correct that through logic and controlling the 4 pistons on the 2 axles. So there were a couple extra logic gates on top that I connected these onto to be able to tell me if it was rolling any way, because we could be able to see the 2, 3, or even 4, I think it's a condition for the 2 to be able, or off the ground on either the front, back, or either the sides to tell it to activate the other side. But the only problem with these extra systems, the more I've complicated it and all, is that when the pistons are supposed to fire becomes more and more complicated. So there's so many variables that sometimes I don't even realize that one thing is telling the pistons to push up when other sides aren't telling it to. And sometimes they conflict with each other and it'll throw it off balance too, like, oh, the timer went there for that one. See, that was a thing where it was pushed up and the pistons and the sensors couldn't actually see the ground, so the timer actually saved it there. But I believe that is all of the crazy scrap mechanic logic builds I have for today. So if you guys like this and want to see more, you can leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel to stay up with scrap mechanic and more of my content. But I've never been great at goodbyes, but my people need me and I need to go.